What's a problem only rich people have?
Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to the Vancher channel. Also, please share your thoughts on this video in the comments. Let's get started.
Story 1. Not knowing if your friends are just hanging around for you or for your money. Having your old friends start calling or hanging around more because now you have money. Answer. I once saw an interview with William and Harry when they were teens, and the one thing that struck me was when William said they had to always be on guard when people were nice to them because of who they were. They couldn't just meet people and say, hey, let's be friends, because some people only wanted to be their friend for the advantages. I imagine that's a lonely life. Story 2. Oddly specific, but finding a way to discard your parents' grandparents' extensive collection of African big game taxidermy. And no, I am not the rich person with this problem. LOL. Story 3. Jealous family members who expect you to now pay for everything. You see this often with celebrities where they have to cut off parts of their family. My sister's husband is a successful athlete, and the worst part about it is his parents and uncles constantly asking for handouts. Answer. You don't even have to be rich, just have a modicum of success. A few years back, I got what would generally be considered a pretty good job. A cousin that generally ignored my existence, including the birth of one of my kids, found out through the family grapevine. He called me up for the first time, months, if not years. After 5 minutes of small talk, he asked for a down payment on his house or a cosign on the loan, preferably both. Story 4. Not rich. I am slightly below average for where I live. I can't afford to buy a home, but I am making 3 to 4x the average salary from where I grew up. My best friend from 5th to 10th grade, the only classmate from school I felt like I was still friends with for years since moving away. He asked me for money, like $500. Not too crazy, but sort of out of the blue. He said some reasons and assured he would pay back. I talked to my wife and said I would like to give it as a gift. So I have this friend $800 as a gift. He was so thankful and said it would put him in a much better spot. Then about 2 months later, he asked for more money, saying some sad story again. I apologized and haven't heard from him since then. Years. I'm sure this happens to many people. I imagine truly rich people have this happen frequently. Answer. Practically all my friends ask me for money, and I get it. Things can be tough, but every time they ask, I feel another inch of me turning into a human ATM. It's such a polarizing feeling because on the one hand, I want to help, but on the other hand, I feel as if everyone just pictures me as a means to an end. Sometimes I feel like if I had no money, I'd have no friends. And true to that, when I had no money, I essentially had no friends. It makes me feel vacuous, and I'd say it contributes to my depression. Meeting anyone new who doesn't know my financial standing and who actually likes me off the bat feels so refreshing. Kid you not, I genuinely get intimacy aroused when I meet a lady that just likes me for me. Unfortunately, in my life, such people are far and in between. Most times, even if it seems like I'm meeting someone new who's naive to who I am and who likes me in that way, it turns out they probably heard about me somehow. And whenever I realize this, it's just so deflating. Story 5. I believe that in life you need challenge, resistance, and only just enough. Too much drags you down, and too little is the problem rich people have. Their perception of reality is a little weird, and they are highly likely to be maladjusted. Story 6. I grew up wealthy. I suppose this doesn't go for all families, but I wasn't allowed to take friends home with me after school. I didn't really get why until when I got older. My parents said they didn't want our peers to treat us differently, seeing how we lived. Story 7. I'm certainly in the one, but I don't think anyone save our parents understand that. People know we do well, but we live far below our means. Even our local friends have bigger houses, nicer cars, etc. Our hardest task is not letting our daughter know what we earn and insulating her from being treated differently. We want her to become a hardworking, dedicated citizen, and then we can hand her what we have put away for her when she starts a family of her own. Hiding the money we give our parents from our siblings is also tough. We don't want them to get upset we are helping them because they cannot also contribute. We do it because we can. To sum up, the hardest part about being financially set is not pissing off everyone around you for either being lucky or smart with our finances. Answer. My brother is well off. Not quite one, but he rolls with some. It takes a family who respects you to not get rolled in some weirdness. It's his money. He earned it. If he wants to share, he would. But also, If I asked, he would share and help me out, but I won't ask. I think that's a big part of it. Having the kind of relationship where they won't ask for money because they know you would give it. Trust, as they don't want to ruin the relationship. Respect. Ain't easy, especially when life gets tough and jealousy starts creeping in. Cool thing is, my brother has helped my own kids see what is possible if they get a good level of education, work at certain types of jobs, and get a bit lucky. So it gives them another option to aim for if they want to. Plus, he buys them cool shoes, so he rules. Story 8. Eminem said his elevator in his mansion broke, so he had to walk like half a block to get a can of Coke. Story 9. Dealing with the public outcry after you partied too hard enough money to feed an entire community for a 10-minute flight in space. Answer. Something like private space travel has to start somewhere and will be funded by the wealthy. It was the same with airline travel at the beginning. While it might seem frivolous, I prefer the wealthy spend it rather than hoard it, if the longer-term benefits are there. Plus, like luxury yachts, it is an industry employing crafts or technical people, so has immediate trickle-down effects. Not that I think trickle-down economics is a good strategy for overall tax policy. I do think there's a lot of people employed in luxury goods and service supply. A lot of people play the lottery hoping they could buy the yacht or fly to Vegas for a gig. Story 10. In my youth, early 20s, I was on vacation with my dad and had dinner with a group. In that group was a man who had been an upper manager at a Fortune 500 company and had retired at age 45. He had 3 homes, London, Washington, D.C., and San Francisco. He had cars, clothes, and staff at each location. He was very polite, and during dinner he explained exactly how much of a hassle living like that was. In short, the more stuff you have, the more your stuff has you. There is always something broken or in need of service maintenance. It is usually where you are not and must be dealt with at an inconvenient time. Yes, he had staff, but whenever there was staff turnover, he had to find people he could trust to replace them. He concluded by saying that owning a single house and renting vehicles and lodging at other locations was a far better plan, and he planned on selling the DC and San Francisco homes. I had always thought that if you were rich enough to have staff, you did not worry about day-to-day problems. But that meeting gave me a new perspective and insight on the realities of that level of wealth. Story 11. My wife and I worked hard to climb the entire tax bracket. We drove junk cars that we didn't like, lived in apartments in neighborhoods that she couldn't go to the gas stations after certain hours. We even had a guy beaten to passing out front. We kept our heads down and plowed forward. For years, almost 2 decades, going to school and working whatever jobs we needed to as we got our educations. Our reward is that everybody tells us we got lucky, that none of our hard work and sacrifices matter. I've had family tell me that I don't understand the hardships of not having money, like I forgot what it's like overnight or something, and they want your opinions as a professional in your field, until they don't agree with it. It's kind of incredible how fast people turn on you. People say that you'll find out who your friends are at your lowest points, and that's true, but you'll also find out at your highest points too. Because trust me, there are a lot of haters out there. Answer. A lot of that is luck. I grew up in the system, did everything I was supposed to do like you, and still lost everything to a medical misdiagnosis, and now I'm essentially homeless and begging people for food. I joined the military when I aged out and then got a degree and was doing okay until then. I just didn't have a lot of savings as I had to take on raising my brothers. Most people are one emergency away from me. Story 12. I have a few wealthy friends. They tend to be very private or just hang out with people that don't have money problems. They live in gated communities, so people can't drive by and see what they have and try to take it from them. You could ransack my entire house and have maybe $700 worth of stuff. That's barely their coffee maker. Also, they tend to live in bubbles, and the world often doesn't make sense to them. Answer. The world doesn't make sense to them. This right here. You've summed it up so well. This is completely anecdotal, but some of the richest people I knew were also the ones most tied up in conspiracy theory culture. These were multimillionaires ranting about how they wanted to force hardship and poverty on everyone. And I'm like, buddy, if you want to meet them, look in your own darn mirror. Story 13. People mistaken the rich thinking that a lot to have. That's wrong. The rich see it as, that's a lot to lose. Story 14. People's behavior to them being heavily influenced by knowing their wealth. Seeing people being authentic or honest gets super, super hard. Story 15. Constant harassment from charities, political parties, distant and not so distant relatives, and all sorts of other people who want money. Story 16. Trusting the people you hire as help to actually do good by you, i.e., that your cleaner doesn't subtly steal from you. Your personal assistant doesn't share or save your most important information. Your driver doesn't put extra miles on your car for his personal use. Your property manager gets things fixed for the price they say, etc., etc. You always have to watch your back. Answer: can confirm. I've gone up and down. I'm much poorer now because I don't work as much while my kid is young. But when I was working a lot and making very good money for my area, the amount of letdown was infuriating. I'm busy. I just want a professional to do their damn job without me needing to oversee or even think about it. I'm paying because I specifically don't want to deal with whatever it is, but it needs done. And it so rarely happened. So frustrating. Story 17. The richest people I ever met only complained about not having enough room for their food in their 2 massive fridges. They had a huge kitchen and a backup storage sort of kitchen. It was crazy for me when I stayed with them for a few days because at home, there's usually only enough food to eat once a day, and it's always cheap food. The rich family had everything fresh and anything I could ever want. I gorged myself on fresh grapes and cheese for snacks, and it was just crazy to me that people have that much fresh food in their house, to the point they complain. Story 18. Rich relative to what? I think our slice of time is really the more important factor in comparing wealth. Much more than compared to the big houses down by the lake in our city, compared to the impoverished nations we vaguely know of in Africa that share our same spot in time. The idea of consuming endless entertainment on a magical little box is an affluenza almost all of us have now. A wild magic that the richest king in history barely could have imagined. And now for $50 for a bottom-of-the-line smartphone, you can enter into that universe. The internet you get on that device is more or less what a rich person gets. Story 19. As someone who is newly rich, I can tell you that having to keep all my wealth secretive from my family kind sucks. They'll just be even less responsible, knowing I could bail them out of massive amounts of debt. Story 20. People ripping you off because they think you have lots of money. I'm not very rich, but I live in a nice house in a nice area, and tradespeople regularly estimate more than they would if it was a less nice house in a less nice area for the same work. They size up your house and think, this person can afford to pay more. It's still a ripoff and dishonest and cunty. I still have to work for my money. Story 21. Voting for the guy who promised to deport their gardeners and pool cleaners, then having their gardeners and pool cleaners deported. Story 22. Biggest problem is worrying that your close people are fake. They are only friendly and trying to know you for your money, not real friends. Story 23. Losing touch with reality. We have wealthy family, not private jet money, but multiple multi-million-dollar homes. Definitely not global wealth. Not billionaires, but extreme wealth. They are lovely and super kind, but they have lost touch with how much of a barrier there is between having money and not having money. They treated us to a boutique hotel for a family event. My husband said he thought we should pay for it when he saw the bill was $13,000. Yes, that's the correct amount of zeros, for 3 nights, room, and adorable breakfast. My husband just about fell out of our luxury bed. Answer: but how are they out of touch with reality in this situation? They likely knew that you couldn't afford the room and paid for it because they wanted you and your husband's company for the weekend. This to me seems to say that they are very much in touch with reality, as they didn't just assume you could afford it. They literally did a wonderful thing for you, and you're on here complaining that they've lost touch with reality. Story 24. Not knowing if the people in your life are in your life because of you as a person or what you potentially can provide for them. Story 25. People assuming you can't possibly have any problems or ever suffer. My dad gave me some money to buy a house, which I bought 2 years ago, and it's wonderful in many ways, but it doesn't mean I haven't struggled and done a lot of shoot jobs whilst also have incredibly crippling mental health problems. It's taken me 2 years to be able to enjoy living in my house and make the most of it, because I was so crippled by anxiety and depression. I've had 10 years of no emotional security or safe place to go to since my dad was very far from being able to provide that, and my mom lives in a different country. My stepbrother is even worse than me, despite having many financial privileges. Obviously, there are billions of people who don't have financial security or emotional security, but I get annoyed with smug middle-class people with nice parents who are still together in the house they grew up in and earning shootloads doing some cushy office job while living with their smug partner, having a go at me for my privilege and thinking I've never struggled or suffered. Story 26. Not rich, but I guess one would be having actual diagnosable depression without people believing you. What could you possibly be sad about? You have everything. I wish I had half of what you had, and I'd be the happiest person ever. Story 27. I had a rich friend many years ago tell me this, and it's stuck with me ever since. Rich people have rich people money problems. Poor people have poor people money problems. We all have problems. It's just the zeros that matter. Story 28. I'm not rich, but I bet finding a good nanny would be one. You know the type, some cute 20-something-year-old who not only goes on vacation with them, but also lives in their home. Then wake up one day and they're 35 with zero employment prospects and only the hope that they marry one of their rich employer's wealthy friends. Story 29. People sucking up to and trying to leech of them, having problems, passing illness and everything most deal with, but everyone thinking they can't experience trouble because they're rich. Story 30. I went to primary school with the son of a billionaire. He wasn't allowed to go to my house, and I would go to his house. It's probably because of his safety, but it was upsetting for me as a child who didn't understand how rich he was, and it was probably upsetting for him as well. And then, when we were teenagers, his bodyguard would follow him everywhere. This guy would go to parties and make out with girls, and his bodyguard would be a few steps away, watching and following his every move. We haven't talked in maybe 20 years, but we grew apart because of how different our lives were. It's difficult to keep in touch, and I'd figure it's hard for him to keep friendships when other people have different realities. Story 31. The pipes burst in one of our homes. My ex-parents owned like 5 houses, and her grandmother owned another 3. Story 32. Not knowing who's genuinely interested in being a genuine friend or SO simply cause you got money. I don't have that, but I have friends with money, and they tell me this stuff a lot. Kinda sad. Story 33. No one values you. Every relationship you have is transactional. Wealth demands an uncanny amount of attention, energy, and resources to manage. In any given day, more people are trying to contact you than there are minutes in the day. You don't own the money, the assets, or resources. They own you. Story 34. I've known a few millionaires, and for some reason, a lot of them stopped caring about updating their homes. I reckon it's because it was working millionaires. You step inside a house down to the coast. It's massive, custom-ordered architecture with that splash of extravagance. But the inside looks like the 80s still, like a time capsule for when they finally had enough to let the world know they were wealthy. Story 35. How to downplay your own happiness in front of others. You know you are better off. You know you won the lottery, but you also know it's socially unacceptable to just openly be happy with it, as you would irritate the fudge out of everyone else. The community would automatically filter you out or force you to downplay how well off you are. Story 36. I grew up wealthy. I can point to a moment when I was 14, when I was at a ski resort at night in a 102-degree pool, sipping fine whiskey with an older girlfriend after fine dining. I thought, well, this is it. This is the peak of opulence. And I felt good, but I'd been happier in countless situations, mostly involving being with friends or playing sports, things that had little to do with money. All around is the message to have more wealth, but I knew then and there the limitations of money. Story 37. From experience of being around rich people for nearly 30 years, the biggest problem is definitely boredom, especially from those who were born into wealth. Story 38. Not knowing if you are being treated very nicely because the person is nice or because the size of your bank account. Story 39. Your kids acting out in increasingly expensive ways because they conflate love and attention with getting money. It's a caricature, but essentially, Mona Lisa Saperstein from Parks and Rec. Money, please. Story 40. A few things. One is being relatable when you've never had to do anything you don't want to do. This is one of the deep, silent connections that most of us have with each other. We're in it together, and rich folks are not, and you can tell. It makes them a little weird. The other thing that also makes them a little weird is that we all have to deal with our own mind every day. We all have monkey mind. It doesn't matter how much money you have. If you don't have a job that gives you a break from that in the form of a distraction, you're in monkey mind all day. Unless you're very grounded and self-aware, it can make you a weirdo. I knew a lot of people like this when I lived in Boulder, Colorado. Not bad people by any means, just not relatable. Story 41. A lot of them are nice, humble, unproblematic people that get accused of being mean, arrogant, and problematic because of the actions of others. Same can be same for other demographics, but I don't think most people realize that problem can reach the one as well. Story 42. My uncle cried about having to sell his second jet ski while I couldn't afford food and was homeless. Story 43. The disconnect between those with money and those without, especially when someone making $500K a year telling me making 20 an hour is asking for too much. Story 44. For average rich, anything involving their home's aesthetics. Being a landscaper made me realize people with money obsess and have issues with the most superficial shoot. Story 45. Jet lag. Most people can't afford to leave the county they live in, much less fly across multiple time zones. Story 46. Deciding how many, quote, carbon credits to buy so you can have multiple estates and private jets, and lecture people about doing their part to stop climate change. Story 47. Yacht creep. First you get some nice little 35-footer, then all of a sudden you have a cruise ship because your neighbor has one. Story 48. When you go to get your jerk bleached but the lady is new, and now your jerk is too white like new veneers, I assume. Story 49. Being so insulated that they never grow as a person. All their experiences are curated and refined. All their relationships are plastic and transactional. This leads to depression, substance abuse, dissociation, personality disorders, etc. Story 50. Becoming embittered because you spend your whole life afraid someone's going to take your money away from you. Story 51. You've sold an investment property in a 1031 exchange, but now you have to find and identify the new property you're going to spend the proceeds on, otherwise you have to pay taxes on it. Story 52. I worked for a rich family. They were inconvenienced by having to return their 2 jets to Cessna because the hand stitching in the leather seats was done by different people and had a different spacing. They had to wait a week with no private jets while the seats were redone. My heart broke for them. Story 53. Time. They have the problem of time to do things. Vacations. Being home after work if they work. Doing things other than work. Story 54. Too much time on their hands. When everyone does everything for you, you would be shocked how many mental health problems idle hands create. Story 55. I work in the billionaire space. The problem is that they have so much money, they are godlike. Money equates opportunity and options for days. They can wake up any day and buy a new plane, boat, hire almost any person, fire any person, buy any home, etc., etc. It's not healthy at times, and I always caution them to have regular psychotherapy and only have supportive, healthy people in their small inner world. Story 56. If you act like a crazy person spewing the most insane racist crap, but you're poor, society rejects you. Do it when you're rich and society calls you eccentric or Kanye. Story 57. So I grew up wealthy, but all of my friends end up being working class and lower class for some reason. It makes it pretty awkward. Also, I know I'm privileged for not having to worry about economic security, but my life isn't super comfy either. One of my parents was borderline psychologically abusive. I'm gay in a very conservative area, and our house is always a disaster. BC, one of my parents has slight hoarding tendencies, and all the funds needed for that, LOL. I actually worked at our family company in manufacturing, at times for 50 hours a week while doing school full-time, with extremely homophobic people who don't know I'm gay. Partly because I like working in trades jobs, and partly to get a little distance from my home. It's really weird because I don't feel wealthy, but I definitely grew up so. Story 58. Dealing with the poor seems to be the most popular answer. I think it could be argued that poor people also have this problem. Story 59. Having to take measures to prevent yourself and your loved ones from being kidnapped for ransom. Even in the US, it does happen. Story 60. When not one, but 2 maids get pregnant by your husband. Maid 1 says the relationship was unequal and demands compensation unless you pay an exorbitant fee. Maid 2 demands child support, saying it's only fair. It's just such a headache to deal with the lawyers, especially since you're already dealing with those pesky protesters standing outside your lawn and yelling 247. Story 61. Tough crowd. Makes me want to say, trying to figure out which Bethel charity to leave it to, and leave it at that. Dislike to get in the way of all the stones being thrown, but not all people that make a lot of money are elitist jerks. My kids didn't even have a clue my old man did okay for himself till they were in their 20s. He gave it all away to well-thought-out orgs, was hands-on with his time, broke his arm at 83 riding in the back of a pickup truck while helping install wells in Haiti, left me nothing, which was cool in my book, and left them a savings bond. Not every rich person is a jerk. Story 62. I know someone who lives in a multi-million-dollar place in Paris. They initially hit a snag getting the permits needed to raise the ceilings of the historic building. Story 63. Everyone has problems and satisfactions. That's part of life, whether you are rich or poor. The difference is that in the case of the poor, most of their daily problems are caused by lack of money. Story 64. My mom once told me she wanted to run away to Mexico with all their money because she was afraid they'd lose it all if the wrong party got into government. We live in a Canadian democracy. All political parties are the same. I have no money. My parents do. Story 65. I guess keeping track of valuable things acquired throughout their lives. I was watching the new show, Your Friends and Neighbors, on Apple last night. John Hamm's character made a comment about piles of forgotten wealth lying around in drawers. Not something I'd considered about wealthy people. But I'd imagine an expensive piece of jewelry acquired at age 20 wouldn't be worn or even remembered by age 40. What do they do with all that stuff? How do they keep track of it? Story 66. 1. Teslas keeps exploding. 2. Husband started a tariff war and your wealth took a dive. 3. Looming fear of deportation to South Africa. 4. Lost your only chainsaw in federal building. Story 67. Assuming rich and wealth are different, and rich implies recently acquired wealth. One disappointing problem is understanding when and where you can use money to solve problems, and recognizing problems that can never be solved with money. Story 68. Managing money and avoiding scams. Timeshares, investment bankers, and real estate agents will prey on you to take as much of your money as possible. It works. Seen it firsthand. They pretend to be your friend in order to sell you expensive things. Story 69. Having to look over their shoulder, knowing that one day the proletariat will have an uprising calling for their heads. They make films about it, actually. Saltburn is a prime example of a horror film for the rich, a middle-class nobody that eliminate off the naive and altruistic rich family that surely didn't deserve to be bamboozled by a creep like Oliver. The rich are scum. That's the problem they have to deal with on a daily basis. Story 70. Not knowing how much a banana costs. Trouble deciding which house to go to in the summer. Servants stealing. How much to tip the local politician for favorable results. Deciding whether the pilot is allowed to bring his family to the apocalypse bunker. Story 71. As a middle-class person, poor relatives see you as a millionaire, so they ask for money all the darn time. Hey, I need $450 or my lights get cut off. What the fudge makes you think I just have $450 hanging around with nothing to do? IDK, I really don't have it to give. Okay, I can make 50 stretch, I guess. I know they highball me, which makes it worse. Story 72. Fearing that one day the masses will achieve class consciousness, and from there things will go the way of 1789 France for them. I know nobody in my tax bracket is worried about that. Story 73. I started telling my wife that we need a holiday house for all of our excess pots, pans, and coffee mugs a couple of years ago. We're not rich, but we've lived long enough to get close. Story 74. From what I've heard, contractors and tradespeople often add a rich tax. A job that might be $500 for the average person, if they're in a millionaire's home, it might turn to $5,000. Same materials, same difficulty of job, same amount of time, just gouging someone because they can easily pay it and might not even think twice about it because of how much money they have. Story 75. When their driver is 2 minutes late to Center City Philly's Ritz, so they angrily says the driver is unprofessional, and they'll never hire that driver again. You could tell he would yell if he could, though it's clear the wealthy uncle was also mad the driver conversed with the other passengers who were visiting the wealthy uncle, which is also the family that the wealthy uncle looks down on for not being wealthy. So when the hired help acts human, must be a robot and use your rich words only. They don't like when people infer their Nepo kids had help, and that they would be in their current job without the wealthy parents' help. They also don't like when non-wealthy people who are eating with them ask for a doggy bag instead of letting all the barely touched food at Capitol Grill go in the trash. Story 76. Having an older brother not inheriting the estate because of his massive coke addiction and stupidity. Story 77. Having to move a bunch of supercars because the one you want to drive is in the back of your car hangar in your private hill. Story 78. Finding a way to stay within the FDIC insurance limits. Once you run out, titling the accounts, it off to the second, third, and fourth bank to start in all over again. Annoying. Story 79. Warren Buffett's only problems are Trump's tariffs, but he likely sees them as an opportunity to buy the dip in the stock market. The overtly rich are in debt with their fancy toy competitions. Story 80. Having to pay $5 million for a dinner where you can suck up to Donald Trump to beg him to exempt your company from tariffs. Story 81. What I observe from any well-off people is that the more they have to worry about. If they have investments, those need to be managed. For example, a larger, more expensive, especially waterfront, home needs constant maintenance, etc. Any toys like motorcycles, boats, vintage cars need to be insured, regular tune-ups, storage, moorage, etc. If they go on holiday, someone needs to be hired to guard their stuff. I have nothing against having nice things, but for some, it seems that keeping on top of all their possessions rules their lives. Story 82. Inheritance estate tax. Current exemption is just shy of $14 million. So if you are set to get more than $14 million from one parent or $28 million from two parents, then you might have to pay taxes on the portion above that. But let's be real. Once you start getting up into the 8 figures, it becomes more about tax planning strategies for tax avoidance than actually paying taxes, but still can be a headache. Story 83. Creating challenges for your kids and teaching them empathy so they don't grow up as useless little shoot. Story 84. My cousin and her family took her father's jet to Aruba, where their au pair stepped on a jellyfish, thus ruining the vacation. Story 85. As someone who grew up poor, went to middle class, and dating someone in the very upper class, trust, it is partially mitigated by being in their own circles. But even then, you can't fully know of that person only is with you because of your titles and wealth. You don't know if revealing your status will change the way you treat people. You think you found someone. Story 86. If you sell a company, people will still complain to you about how it's being run, even though there's nothing you can do about it now. Story 87. In Rio de Janeiro, rich people move around by helicopter because the streets are just too dangerous. They are known to the gangs and will be targeted. Story 88. Having to hire someone to manage your other hires because managing your house staff is starting to feel like a job. Story 89. Running out of positive goals and being left only with the sick pleasure of taking things away from those who have less than you. Story 90. Trusting people with your home. Playing games with your staff like leaving money out to see if you can trust them. Story 91. Estate planning. Who's going to run your business? Who gets your money and who doesn't? It's all the drama of a family soap opera with very high stakes. Story 92. My aunt and uncle are rather well off. I think one of their biggest complaints is property management and tenants. They have multiple houses locally. Imagine every time something in your place breaks. Multiply the frequency by 5. None of it's catastrophic, but a water heater breaks and you gotta buy a new one and find somebody to install it. People move out. People don't pay rent. It's not like they can't handle any of it. It's just little, shut that chips away. The bigger one is a house in Florida that is an Airbnb. Financially, they have gotten taken to the cleaners. Remote property management through Airbnb in hurricane land. Not a high-income rental, and the little income they do get got eaten up in various fees and expenses. Story 93. Ironically, this was the above post in my feed, struggling to break a champagne bottle on a new yacht. Story 94. A rich man needs it, a poor man has it. If we eat it, we die. And when we die, we bring it with us. What is it? Nothing. Story 95. I never have a single dollar bill, so when a homeless person asks me for $1, I truly don't have it. The smallest bill I carry is a 20, so next time, ask for that. Story 96. The poor, thinking they should be paid a living wage after working under the rich, which in turn enrich the rich even more. Story 97. 1. BMW or Mercedes, 0.5. Lambo or Ferrari, 0.1. Bentley or RR. But maybe if you're that rich, you just get all 6 and the question becomes, which car shall we take today? Story 98. 1. My buddy's yacht is worth $500 million. Mine is only $100 million. 2. This new stadium I own, mostly financed by taxpayers, had the most luxury box seats in the country, until this other guy got one with more seats. It's not fair. Story 99. Running out of pages in your passport. I know someone that got turned away at customs for not having a stampable page. Story 100. Finding that you can't coast. You must always have some kind of income. The paid-off house your parents left you? Property taxes and maintenance add up, especially on the old 1800s-era mansions. That's why a lot of second- and third-generation family wealth goes away. The children-grandchildren didn't count on working and have few skills and no ambition, and everything job-wise is beneath them. Look at the Vanderbilts. Cornelius Vanderbilt made Bill Gates kind of money for his era. The rest of the family didn't. By the third generation, none of them were even millionaires. Story 101. We're not like rich, but my husband likes his cars. We have 6 with only 2 drivers in our home, and we'll switch up what he drives to work. And I get mad when I wake up and find out he took the one I wanted to drive that day, LOL. Story 102. Hordes of poor people trying to take your money by forcing the government to take it from you by force. Story 103. Keeping track of their property holdings. Some completely forget that they own large buildings or city blocks because if the sheer volume of holdings. Story 104. That they are psychopaths who do not realize that other people are real, have real needs, real feelings, and real value. Story 105. Having to fly first class just to avoid being constantly bothered by other passengers or even being at risk. More a rich and famous problem than just rich. It makes air travel unnecessarily expensive, which, unless you are very rich, will make traveling expensive enough that it will be a considerable expense that will reduce your willingness to travel. Story 106. My ex said her Escalade was too big. She disliked her Mercedes SUV, but really loves her Land Rover. It took her a year to decide what vehicle truly completes her. Story 107. I'm not even rich, but all these people I haven't talked to in ages started crawling out of who knows where. Once it became apparent my business was becoming successful. You have to be really careful about your relationships because so many people only want to talk to you for your money. I believe there becomes a point of wealth where you are very lonely because you can't trust anyone. Story 108. They'll not know if their partner really loves them or their money. Probably only applicable if the relation started after getting wealthy. Story 109. Buying out an aisle at the store. Over-bargaining, giving people too much money, having too much money, too much success, suffering from it. Dangerous habits for the poor could be 10x more dangerous for the rich. Story 110. Realizing that you are now more often envied for tangible achievements instead of being admired for them. It wasn't always this way in history. It's insidious how the youth are ensnared in thinking they're the good guys by justifying theft from the exceptional among us through political agendas and tax policy. Story 111. It's not that they have people asking them for money. Even non-wealthy people have this problem. It's that many of those people feel entitled to that money. And no matter what their financial situation, they think they can always afford it, and it would make no difference to them. My aunt and uncle are quite wealthy. A few years ago, my cousin, not their daughter, wanted to send her daughter to a big university, but she couldn't afford it. So she asked my aunt and uncle, her aunt and uncle as well, for them to pay it. The tuition for 4 years would have been $150K. Meanwhile, my aunt and uncle have 2 children, one of whom was going to college, and the other one that was set to go to college. And the older daughter was in a serious relationship and looking to move to another state after graduation and get married. They told my cousin they couldn't do it, and my cousin stopped speaking to them. Her and my aunt had a lifelong close relationship up to that point. Then my cousin's daughter ends up going to that school anyway and drops out after a year because she didn't like it. But I've seen various situations like that with other wealthy people. Story 112. Not knowing whether their friends are only around because they are rich. That, and they worry that their kids will end up being complete failures, just wanting to get high and spend their parents' money. Story 113. The problem with having $5 million is that you get to meet people with $50 million. Once you do that, $5 million doesn't seem like much. Feeling poor because you only have $5 million is a rich person problem. Story 114. When it's your family's money, but not your money, it can be upsetting. I have some friends who are below the poverty line, and I feel so guilty having the privileges I have, but not being able to help them much. I work part-time and the vast majority of my paycheck goes to my friends, but my paycheck is not my parents' paycheck. My friends are still struggling with bills, and I can only do so much to help. Story 115. Being vilified by poor people and political ideologues who have no idea what it took to earn the wealth. Story 116. Getting dopamine from normal things. They don't get dopamine anymore from buying stuff or regular things. I guess that's why Epstein Island existed and stuff like that. Story 117. Heavy pockets, 1.5x smaller taint than average, unable to distinguish dog breeds through smell alone, half a canister of oysters, without an expiration date. They dislike pickles. They're forced to eat pickles for sexiness. Leg hair grows in super thick because they shave constantly. Can afford to run away from any problem. They'll never find true peace. Not immune to any goat-related diseases. Illegal to name their first child. Do not imagine dragons. Are Steven Seagal. Story 118. What if this rich person was one of the most generous people you know, with both time and money, bestowed good values on their kids, and was the best listener ever? Story 119. Not necessarily fully rich people, but I don't know of any poor people with prescription opioid addictions. Story 120. Small inconveniences become overwhelming when you have everything. The entire reason we have services like Uber Eats and DoorDash are because people are too inconvenienced to go out and get food themselves. Story 121. They worry that some people only like them for their money, or demand extra generosity, or judge them for how they spend money. They worry that other people will ask them for stuff and be jealous of them, and be mean because of that. These are normal rich people, not sociopathic billionaires. Just look at the people in power now in the tech businesses and other areas of power to observe sociopathic billionaires. They are different from normal rich people, and far worse. Sociopathic billionaires always want more and want others to have less. They are massively insecure, knowing their wealth is massively underserved, and are always looking for what else they can take away from others. They do not care what others think, and also try to insulate themselves from knowing how despised they are. Story 122. Am not rich. I have more than 95% of the world population. The difference in wealth between the top 5 and top 3 is astonishing. In the tens of millions. The difference in wealth between the top 1 and the top 0.1 is in the billions. That's crazy to me. The fact that I need to have tens of millions more than I have now to move from top 5 to top 3, and I need to have tens of billions to make it to the top 1 and beyond. Story 123. The government taking from the needy only creates more scarcity related to recent health cuts. Keep it up and the rich will have another problem. The disenfranchised will retaliate. Story 124. Rich is a contextual perspective. Most of the truly poor don't have college computers or get on social media, so their job's perspective on a rich person problem is only having 200 megabits PS internet access. Story 125. How much money it takes to buy all the senators they want. It's not much, but they still gotta pay something. Story 126. Ever cheated in a game and got unlimited funds? Everything got boring quick. You may think these people are stupid for it, but to be really honest with you, your views on this topic would change too. This is probably one of the biggest problems. Most other things get easier, but what really counts in the end is where your mind is at. Perspective is king. Story 127. What's a problem only rich people have? There seems to be a particular psychological condition of ultra-wealthy people. Many, not all, seem to have a severe lack of empathy that comes from losing connection with the common stresses of life for the vast majority of people. Many famous billionaires genuinely come off as incredibly unhappy and paradoxically unfulfilled people. They seem addicted to their sense of superiority and seem to always eventually push away the things that make the average person's life worth living. Family and true friends that will tell them what they need to hear, not just what they want to hear. After being told they are always right by the people they surround themselves, they seem to develop a megalomaniac, unempathetic disdain for the majority of people they consider inferior. Sounds like a lonely, miserable, and self-inflicted hell in gilded luxury. Story 128. I had a work buddy in my 30s whose father owned a company and made a small fortune. This friend had no ambition to work and only did do because his parents insisted. He even bluntly said he was waiting them out. Story 129. Keeping people off their beach. My boss has a beach house and they own the beachfront so far from Tideline. There are people who actually patrol for that. Story 130. The people think you don't have problems. And every problem that you want to talk, they're going to say, you can solve it with money. Story 131. Running out of Grey Poupon and having to ask the chap in the Rolls Royce next to you in traffic if you could have a spot of his, assuming he has some. Story 132. When your primary vehicle is already in the main spot, finding a decent parking spot for the second mega yacht is such a burden for the staff to bear. Story 133. We never really know how much to tip our housekeepers, gardeners, pool guys, and au pairs. So stressful. Story 134. Whatever. It always feels like the rich are trying to sell this idea that being poor is actually easier in ways our tiny peasant brains just don't understand or haven't considered. But it's not like they can't afford to become impoverished. If wealth sucks so much, let it go. Live within means you can manage. It's not like there's any sort of barrier for entry into this impoverished lifestyle that rich people have been tragically locked out of against their will. You want my poverty? You think it's so great to live like this, free from the woesome burden of your wealth? Buy it from me. I know you can afford it. All it costs is what you have. Story 135. Little problems become major headaches because you're a target. My very rich cousin has a couple of mild screw-up kids. Small fish fight in fancy school. Very big deal. Because everyone else's parents are rich and have lawyers. Kids sneak some adult beverage for a party at the house. Lawyer time, police time, because other parents pull up the guard around their own kid's reputation. Lower-end blue-collar, 5-minute parenting becomes a problem with a comma attached to the bill. But he's a rich jerk trumper, so no tears needed. Story 136. Having to pay more for everything done in your home because people know you have money and will charge you 3 times the normal cost because they think you don't know the actual cost. Story 137. Not knowing how to properly furnish their home in an aesthetically pleasing way. I've seen all of these millionaire house tours, and these people have all that money and square footage, but not an ounce of taste. Only rich people have the rare talent of making their house look hungry and desolate. Story 138. Not realizing all of their problems can go away in a second. No one is forcing anyone to be rich. I'm happy to help out. Give the cash to me, please. Story 139. I worked for a few rich people as a computer guy, and one of them is that they get charged the highest possible rates for everything, and even if they don't, they think they are. I had one guy call it the Tribeca tax. BC, anyone who could afford to live there was doing well and could afford top rates for everything. Story 140. They cannot ever truly read that are people genuinely admiring you or just good at pretending in many levels. I am fat slob with huge male body part and barely moderate money. I get my admiration honest as can be. Story 141. Getting small little checks for 40 or 50 in the mail because you forgot to sign up for dividend reinvestment. Story 142. Too many vehicles for the garages, pool leaves, lazy nannies, utterly no idea. Gotta head to work now. Bye. Story 143. People judging everything you do. Like, oh, so-and-so buy this brand of milk. That brand is the most expensive milk there is. Or, that brand is super cheap. Couldn't they afford more expensive milk? Like, who cares? Story 144. All American hating and despising them for not paying their fair share and burdening the rest to carry their load. Story 145. Deciding what color sand to order around my private island. I was thinking black would look good with my lava waterfall, but red hides the blood. Before you judge, moving sand is a tricky affair. I already lost 80 workers this week. Story 146. Thinking about new ways to cause the peasants to dislike one another rather than hating you, so as to maintain the status quo. Story 147. How to ensure the loyalty of your security forces when the world collapses and money isn't worth anything. Story 148. I'm not wealthy, just make much more than the average Pakistani salary. So in Pakistan, I am considered upper class. An issue I face is managing the house helpers, telling the gardener what to do, telling the cook what to make, making sure the cleaners haven't missed a spot. The worst part of it is having to discipline them when they don't do their jobs properly. Worst part is having to discipline them. I'm a huge pacifist, so I dislike doing it. It's hilarious when you think about it as a problem, but it is a problem nonetheless. Story 149. Not understanding why some people just don't like them for getting away with like certain types of crimes. Story 150. Wanting to do things with friends who can't afford it. Yes, if you're very rich, you can pay for everyone, etc. But in my own more relatable way, I've been financially comfortable at times and hung out with friends who were in a tighter spot. It's hard to discuss openly, like, what kind of restaurant can you afford? Or, let's get out of town this weekend. What's a realistic budget that works for everyone? It's understandably quite uncomfortable to say you can't splurge on something that would make other people happy. You're the downer, etc. I really wanted to try out this new place, but no. Yeah, let's get Chinese takeout tonight. Ever been to cool weekend getaway? No, yeah, me neither. I'll go there someday. Then it creates incentives to make plans with people who are more in your range, financially. It progressively excludes other people who are in different financial situations than you. It sucks unless you actively and continuously seek out activities that are welcoming to everyone. Story 151. How to get richer. It is a dog-eat-dog world out there, Woody. Prospector. Stinky. Poor people tend to worry about the next meal. E. For the extreme rich. How to protect their wealth also. Story 152. Balancing wanting your kids to have the finer things in life without letting them become spoiled brats. Story 153. Taxes. The knowledge that there are people out there who have less than you, but you deserve to have what they have, so you have even more than they could ever imagine having. Being only a multimillionaire and not a multi-billionaire. The fact that you can't take all of your riches with you when you die. Story 154. Never having genuine relationships. People can be your friend just for your money, and lovers will love you just for your money. Story 155. Accounting for all your assets, stocks, real estate, bank balances. I know rich people who've misplaced jewelries or forgotten about some bank accounts, etc. Story 156. When you are used to a certain standard of living, it can cause stress that all of that can disappear. Story 157. Rich people eventually have no friends around them. Only people that are paid to be there. You have weird relationships, like a friend that comes over with a massage table to give a massage. Another that helps raise your kid. They're true friends that they didn't alienate, visit once every few years or less. Story 158. Probably boredom. If you can do whatever you want, then what is there to do when you run out of things to do or places to visit? Now, I love to just sit around at home on a weekend, but after a few years of that, I would probably go insane. Story 159. I think, depending on how rich you are, not having any true friends or community, just allies who you tentatively trust not to backstab you. Always having to be on guard and on your toes because anyone can be an enemy. Always having to keep up with affairs going on because you can't be caught unaware in your social circles. Story 160. Buying multiple mansions, living the life for 30 years, and then one day deciding they just want to be a normal person, while still have billions in their checking account, don't have to worry about working a regular job. Story 161. Having the factory parts on your car be nicer than any aftermarket parts, so you can't modify it without either ruining the car or doing a full build. Story 162. I love how all the replies are about how poorer people view them socially. Like, yo, spend your wealth so they ain't poor, and you don't have that problem. Not hard. Story 163. I was a funeral director for the most expensive mortuary in the richest part of the county. The leading cause of tragic end among men was impending divorce, I assume with infidelity as a cause. The leading cause of passing among wealthy children were accidents, like a skiing accident while at a resort. Story 164. Never knowing if you have truly genuine friendships and relationships. Do they really like me, or are they just trying to get at my fortune? Story 165. The biggest problem I have seen is even when the rich person is completely wrong, they are still correct. Story 166. People try to network with you instead being genuine. I've seen this one a lot. Like, yeah, maybe through me you'll meet the right people, but I'm a person too. Story 167. Certain rich people are secretly lonely. Money can't buy things that they thought would make them happy, but genuine happiness can't be bought. That's the reality. Sometimes they wish to feel the happiness of the poor people family, despite their challenges and social status. Story 168. So my parents are the first generation wealthy. They always made sure to give me more than I ever needed, as they themselves grew up very poor and were bullied for the same. Jealousy is indeed very normal. People often think all my achievements are only because of my parents. Often get taunted, yeah, it's because if your parents. I don't feel bad anymore as my parents are really smart people. So I will utilize their intelligence and learn as much as I can. Plus, I was taught never to make money everything. I am very selective about the people I am around, and I personally don't like lazy people. So people often assume I am an elitist. That's not the case. I just don't want to be around jealousy. I want to be around people who are hardworking, better than me in every sense, people who can add value to my life in terms of intelligence and knowledge. Plus, I am not old money, but my parents have the best of manners that they pass down. So people really think I am some generational wealth person who owns mansions and private jets. So the manners. Plus I dress up really good as my field is luxury fashion. But the truth is, for me, money is the least interesting thing about a person. It's all about hard work, manners, discipline, empathy, and kindness. Story 169. Actually making a choice when you can get whatever you want. I gained my money, enough so where if there's a choice between two things, I can just buy both and throw away the other. Because who has time to deal with returns? But now that I have kids, I try to be more mindful because my money is not your money. But when you can make a decision, we can move forward. Story 170. Being able to buy anything you want would quickly diminish the excitement of getting things. Then you have to turn to banging kids for kicks. Story 171. A mentor of mine said, I think I need to buy another house so my money isn't getting taxed so much. Story 172. I get paid very well, but it wasn't always the case. Today, most of my income goes straight to retirement savings accounts as I scramble to not be destitute in my old age. My actual take-home pay is very low, but the taxman don't care. I often have to scramble to find 15K sums to pay my tax bills. It's probably just poor planning on my part for a very privileged problem to have. But it does kind of psychologically suck to still feel poor and then have huge sums of money owed all the time. Plus, local government keeps raising taxes on high earners because politicians are terrible at managing government spending. To fix the problems they make, they demonize high earners in public messaging as a way to get people to vote for higher taxes on them. Honestly, I feel like I've followed the rules I've been hearing ever since I was a poor kid about working hard, delaying gratification, and saving every penny. I don't like feeling like the bad guy all the time for it. Oh well. Story 173. You make doubts. You cannot identify the genuine treatment of people in you. Sincerity, or it's only about your money. Story 174. Rich people tried all the products out there and can't find a perfect one because they really like one feature from this brand and another feature from that brand. They need a product that is custom made, and after a few months they are not satisfied again, looking for something more that is not there. Story 175. Getting driven around in a limousine, run out of Grey Poupon mustard, and then having to continue driving around until you can pull up next to another limousine and ask if they have any you can borrow. Story 176. A woman who was a trophy wife and bought expensive wine from me complained that the Porsche is in getting detailed, so I'm slumming it in the spare Range Rover today. Meanwhile, I drove an Oldsmobile Cutlass. Story 177. I think one is that it's assumed that money can solve all problems, so people are resentful. It won't cure your cancer, though you may be able to afford the best treatment, or bring your child back. You can help some family with some financial issues, but maybe not all. And they'll never understand the limitations unless you're Warren Buffett. And they probably don't understand that many, wealthy people are highly leveraged, so it's really just a shell game. Story 178. I feel all problems stem from the same places. The only difference is the magnitude or urgency. Rich people are more likely to choose what problems they have. Their problems are more like costs of free will. Story 179. There was a question posted here yesterday asking about expensive hobbies, and there were many replies saying, boats. Someone replied to one of those comments saying specifically, yachts, duh, and someone else replied to that saying, most people don't even consider the cost of maintain and paying for a crew and fuel for the yachts either. Like, no, fucking, shoot, you absolute cock-end. Majority of people can't afford a decent bow rider. That was one of the most out-of-touch statements I've ever seen someone make. Story 180. The problem is sifting people out who are richer than oneself, especially if planning a showing-off party. Story 181. If you've ever watched an episode of 90 Day Fiancé, where Asuelo is being harassed by his mother and sister for money, and then harassed about how he brings shame to his family, and then day in and day out belittled and humiliated. That happens a lot when you came from poverty and make even a little bit more money than your family. It's very hard. Story 182. Having a hard time picking which yacht to give up to be able to allow people to have groceries. It's a real struggle. Story 183. eliminate their connection with society because they are clouded by the illusion of wanting more wealth. Story 184. Going abroad for college and university and having to get rid of all your stuff when it's time to come back. This actually happened to a friend I knew back then. He sold some of his stuff to us at a friend price, well below fair market value. Story 185. Being rich doesn't stop your parents from choosing boardrooms over birthdays. You just learn early that comfort doesn't mean closeness. Story 186. Hey, I'm broke as fudge and still have no friends. At least let me be miserable on a 50-foot sailboat. Story 187. Dealing with poor, entitled people. To be fair, even me being lower middle class financially, poor, entitled people piss me off long. Story 188. You aren't ever allowed to be in a bad mood or have a bad day because everyone just thinks, well, you have money. How bad could things possibly be? Struggles are struggles, but having money can remove people's empathy from the equation. Story 189. Wouldn't know. I'm not rich. I guess having too much money. Based on the saying, too much of anything is not good. I assume that. Story 190. Had a friend complain about how hard it is to stay organized when you own 3 houses in 3 different states. Story 191. Imagine playing an RPG where your character has unlimited gold. Now there's no stakes, no sense of accomplishment, no saving budgeting for an upgrade, no fun. Story 192. Not getting homestead exemption on your second home. On second thought, in today's economy, it might be having to pay property tax at all. Story 193. Ran out of 2 milk because about to leave to head to the beach house and didn't restock. Had to use half and half on my cereal instead of milk. Turns out it's so much more creamy and delicious. Now I will only use half and half on cereal and have no need for milk. Story 194. Of course everyone thinks, being used for your money. But I mean, anyone can be used for something. And if you have it and are a good friend, wouldn't you want to share it? Hear me out, please. If I have a sweet jerk ride, and everything else I own is average or below average, wouldn't I always be like, hey, the weather is amazing. Let's take my awesome sweet jerk car to the club, movie, beach, whatever. Don't all friends have perks? If that's the only reason someone wants to be your friend, okay, that's a problem. But I don't think rich people should even care if it's a true perk and you have a true friend. I know this a wildly judgmental statement, but rich people hoard their money, so they are probably overly suspicious or overly cautious with sharing. So they are probably also a source of their own isolation because they are so afraid of someone needing help and them being in a position to help and then having a moral dilemma on their hands. I would help my friends with anything I could. I just don't have money, so I'd have to offer help with services I could provide and/or my time. They need a sitter in a pinch. Call me. I'll do it for free. Need a ride because your car broke down? I'm your gal. Need $500 for that prescription. Sorry, I don't have that, but I'll start looking for coupons for you. Story 195. Didn't grow up wealthy at all, and I've lived not knowing where my next meal would come from. I grew my own modest fortune by starting my own electrical contracting business and filling need where I saw them. Now I just have to deal with passive-aggressive jokes from my friends, and I often feel like a guilty outsider on struggles they're going through that I can absolutely relate to, but feel like I don't have the right to, since I'm doing well now. Maybe it's all just anxiety and insecurity, but for what I gained in security, I lost in relatability. Story 196. I'll tell you one bit of happiness that rich people will never understand. Making that last car payment. Story 197. My wife and I have a beautiful home and guest house in the tropics. Before I was wealthy, a few friends and family visited me in the various places where I lived, as you'd expect. But man, build a luxury home in a highly desirable tourist location, and everyone wants to visit. Then they think, because we have a housekeeper, they can behave like pigs. Then they tell us what an amazing time they had and try to invite themselves back. Having money has been a constant test of boundary setting. Story 198. Fear of losing wealth. It may sound lame and lesson until you've experienced it, but it's very binding. There's fear within you, and it's reflected in each and everything you do. Each and every relationship, job, transaction. It never leaves you. Story 199. Constant dissatisfaction of life. I've never met a wealthy person who was ever truly satisfied with their ability to move freely in life. Story 200. The generational rich people are the issue. They lack an understanding for anybody less fortunate than them and think they're better. The people who work to become rich are better than the rich 20-year-olds who were given daddy's money. Story 201. Home insurance insecurity. Burglars will be targeting those with valuables in their homes, and less so smaller apartments. Story 202. The peasants will break into their bunkers and eliminate them, or they will trap them in their bunkers and set them on fire. If they're outside of their bunkers, the Poors are all around them and could eliminate them any minute. Even those that they thought were trustworthy, they are never safe. Story 203. Their kid can't find their iPad because the maid moved it. Yes, I saw this happen. No, not my kid. Lol. Story 204. I see my friend who's wealthy and they always have work being done on their house. Seems there's always something going on and it's hectic. Story 205. I think kids from rich families sometimes have trouble realizing the value of a dollar and how much of their success is actually attributed to their parents. Story 206. I have a relative that is wealthy and also very successful in the finance world. We didn't know until after they were forced to retire relatively early that they personally managed several billions of dollars of other people's money. The stress from his job had a huge negative impact on his health. If anyone has watched This Is Us, Sterling K. Brown's character has a mental breakdown at work, also worked in finance, caused by a number of factors, one of which was the stress of his job, and is forced to retire. Story 207. Worrying about how to lower their tax bill, loopholes, itemizing versus standard deductions, tax havens, etc. Story 208. That having money doesn't make happy mindset. Thinking that other people don't go through problems minus their privileges and funds, but expecting people to feel sorry for them because they have money and still face struggles, mentally or physically or whatsoever. Like, no shoot, Sherlock. Maybe I am approaching the question a bit different with that, but it's still a problematic thing that only occurs to rich people. That's it for this video. Don't forget to support Vancher and my second channel, Vanchus. See you soon.